Hi, Sean Massey here. I'm a prosperity and self-love coach, an author and mentor, and leading expert on the topic of self-solidarity, as well as a certified facilitator of the work of Byron Katie. Welcome to this pre-webinar training on the first and hugely popular one of my happiness hacks, simple tools for taking life as it comes. That is how to feel better fast when you are fearful or upset or angry. This hack shows you, this wheel of self-love, shows you how to erase regret and self-doubt and the chronic indecision that those two states can lead to by finding your own innocence and knowing how to fearlessly face your fears, and by giving yourself what you thought you needed from others and from life. The wheel of self-love really represents the 3 steps that changed my life so much, as I used to live in a place of should've, would've, could've, and the real pain of regret hell, that kicked in the stomach feeling that I often walked around with and couldn't get past the things I regretted and the fear of their outcomes. So this video will include a short introduction to the concept of self-solidarity, as well as the reliable symmetry of happiness, something I'll be covering in much more depth, how to turn around whatever upsets you and follow 6 steps to really result in radical relationship relief. And the folks in our community that are using these have such tangible and sustainable shifts in their lives. So I'm hoping you'll show up for that webinar. And I actually forgot to mention that as part of that, you'll get, if you stay for the webinar, the ebook, The Spark of Self-Love, which also goes into how to use the wheel of self-love and a situation that happened with me that makes it very clear, as well as you'll get that radical relationship relief blueprint and the 6 keys that I will be covering in the webinar. So hoping you can make it for that. But just, coming back to this idea of self-solidarity right now, as a result of all that, and I get to live in this beautiful place and have retreats here, and the people who are doing this work get in this place, which you can see on their faces. They're just being relaxed and feeling close and unthreatened by life, taking life as it comes, and that comes from being connected to yourself. So even though we're going to talk about relationships in depth in the webinar, this part, coming home to yourself, which happens as a result of this wheel of self-love, changes all relationships so radically that I thought it was worth doing a separate little training on that. Because for me, it wasn't always that way. This beautiful place that I show you, yes, for a while I was living here. I seem to have the life of my dreams, and I'll talk a little more about that tomorrow too. But I was really drowning in anxiety and overwhelm, and I was making a lot of compromises in my relationships, believing I needed to turn myself into a pretzel to be who everyone wanted me to be. So when I got hold of this concept of self-solidarity and started to live in that place, everything changed. And it just continues to get deeper and richer. So what is self-solidarity? I'm going to read something as part of a meditation we're doing later. I'm actually going to read an in-depth definition of self-solidarity. But you may think it's something about taking good care of yourself, about self-love, which means, drinking a full glass of water when you wake up in the morning, meditating, exercising, and it's actually none of that. And all the talk of self-love that people have does nothing if your internal critic believes it is saving you with the criticisms it's hammering you with. It believes it is tenacious because it actually thinks it's helping you by telling you that you're all wrong, that you're bad, that you did it wrong, that everyone's going to hate you now, that people are going to leave, all the places that it goes to when you go into regret and you fear for them too, the consequences of what you've done for them. And your monkey mind tells you the worst. And you can't just overcome that by saying, oh, I need to love myself more. It just doesn't work. In fact, you can actually use the lack of self-love as another way to beat yourself up. So if you feel you're not loving yourself enough. So the part of you really that's doing that is the most innocent of all. And that's the one that we're here to help with this wheel of self-love. But first, just when you think about the direct path to true, unshakable self-advocacy, unconditional forgiveness, and never leaving your dearest self, well, those things, first of all, are the definition of self-solidarity in my mind. Always coming home and advocating being with yourself, finding where you're always doing the best you can, no matter what, whether or not anyone else knows it or sees it. You stay with that part of yourself. And so what we're going to talk about in the webinar is this path where you don't need to go to India to find a guru. Your boyfriend or girlfriend will do just fine, or anyone that is pushing your buttons. So I'm going to be talking about that in the webinar, but the part that you can use when you're beating yourself up is to recognize that those fears that you tell yourself do often come from a projection that other people or life won't give you what you want now as a result of something you said or did, or the way you're showing up. Your identity is all wrong. You weigh too much. Whatever it is that you hate about yourself, it is tied into a survival script that says you need something else from others or from the outside world. But this is where we started, and that's what we're going to return to. Going through life with this sense that you let yourself know, you let this little one inside you know what, sweetie? There is nothing you can do to make me go away. You belong to me, I belong to you, and we're going to be okay no matter what. And when you really find these things, you really find your innocence, that little one just wants to go out and play. It wants what children want. It wants to sleep and be held and play and eat and be connected to yourself and to your little projects. Whatever you're doing, you're 100% with that. And that's what starts to emerge when the stories that have been terrorizing you get taken care of. So we're going to drop into just a little meditation now. So look at something in the room around you, or this little person on the screen. Maybe the edges of your computer. Notice the way you're sitting, what you're doing with your hands, where your feet are. Notice that you didn't decide any of that. It's just a happening. And connect with it just as it is. You may want to start with the silence of the objects around you. And notice the stories that come in and say that they're all wrong. There's too much clutter. Why can't you do it better? This is going to happen as a result. Or maybe you're tuned into the beauty and the perfection and the support of those objects, but you can't seem to notice that when it comes to yourself. And maybe you even can right now, but there are times when you go into a big piece of regret, of going, oh, why didn't I do it that way? And of fearing the outcomes of the way things are unfolding. Fearing you'll get to that place where you have only yourself to blame and not know how to get out of it. So just let yourself be breathed and be with all of that I've said for a few moments. Just notice as 3 or 4 breaths happen to you without you orchestrating it at all. Notice what's going on with your body and reassure it that you're right here with it. You're not going anywhere. And even if you go into a little bit of a scary situation, you'll be able to come back out of it better than you were before you had the thoughts that scared you. So think about a situation. Maybe it's right now. Maybe it was in the past where you felt angry at yourself. And while we can do this related to a state of your being, like the wrinkles on your neck or something like that, the size of your bank account, the way you've used your time today. Well, that's actually a good one. How do you beat yourself up? I want this regret situation to be something where it's an action. It's something you did or said. You can actually see it in your mind. Maybe you spent your time doing X and now you're going, I should have done blank. Why didn't I? I'm never going to get this done. Or maybe you said something. Maybe you jumped in and gave some advice to your precious grown child or someone that you know could be alienated by that advice. Or you took an action on their behalf where you fear the consequences of having stepped in where maybe it wasn't really your place to do so and you fear the consequences to them. Just find a situation. And we're going to come back to that in just a minute. First, as finishing off this meditation, I want to just read something that came to me to write when a friend of mine about 1.5 years ago asked me, well, what is this self-solidarity thing? The symmetry of self-solidarity is the idea that at the same time you are undoing so much of the ego's story through your work and questioning your thinking, and you're dismantling that old self that seemed to be creating the real problems, you begin to meet and fall completely in love with the most tender part of you that is still holding on to the thinking, and thus innocently creating what remains of your suffering. In this meeting, this reconciliation, you become who you really are. The unconditional forgiveness, warm understanding, and unfailing solidarity and self-advocacy that cannot come from anyone or anything outside you. And in finding that inner connection, you do also connect to everything outside you. You and the small scared parts of yourself will begin to experience a sacred and absolute belonging to each other that allows you to look forward to whatever life brings. And whatever you have experienced of this, I can tell you it is just the tip of the iceberg. if you continue, this sweet self-solidarity will become the mainstay of your existence and your main line to what is beyond existence. Together we will face the fear in this in this little video of your worst case scenarios where external events are concerned, and discover that the cost of failing to support yourself, of beating yourself up, and of so quickly leaving your most innocent, well-meaning self is worse, far worse for ourselves, others, and the planet than any of the other consequences you may fear. All right, so coming back out of your meditation, sorry, I forgot to put those slides up as I was reading in case you were watching the screen. But what we've been doing is over there on the left, what I had been doing at least. I would think of a situation that was, I would be fine moving forward, thinking I'm doing the best I can, and suddenly, after it was done, the thought would hit, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. Or maybe somebody got mad at me because I did it, or looked at me wrong, or ignored me, or was in pain because of my actions, and I would go right into beating myself up. And I couldn't get out of that wheel. I would relive that, what I call regret hell, over and over again. And even weeks or months later, if I thought back on that situation, I would get that kicked in the stomach feeling. And it did create a lot of anxiety in my life and ultimately self-doubt. I started not believing in my own actions and trusting myself. And that led to really chronic indecision. And it was only recently, a few years ago, that I realized the indecision was not my fear of the outcome, that I would choose the wrong choice. It was my fear that I would beat myself up for choosing the wrong choice, that I would go into regret hell, because it is one of the most painful states that we humans can engage in. I don't know if dogs or any other animal has this capacity. I don't believe my dog sits around going, oh, darn it, I wish I had caught that ball differently. Or, it's just kind of amazing that we have this ability to say should have, which means absolutely nothing, really. And I realized back when I was 28 that should have created a huge amount of pain in my life. And in fact, I kind of banned it from our household. I realized that I had done that because when my daughter was 3, I was saying something and she went, oh, Mommy, you said should have. So it was a dirty word in our house because I had realized how much pain it caused me, but I still didn't know how to get out of it. And so what happens, what I realized once I, in part having learned the work of Byron Katie and gone deeply into that, becoming a certified facilitator myself over the course of about 6 years, it was like a graduate degree. And that was something that I still hadn't gotten hold of this, but it helped me realize these 3 steps that I was doing that were making me feel better. And so the first step is to go into, well, what was I thinking when this thing happened? So I want you to go back to the moment your situation happened. See yourself just as you were in that situation. See yourself. What were you thinking right before you did that thing? Get a really clear picture. Just remember, you are still all the ages you've ever been. You're still that part of yourself that you're beating up right now. That's you that you're doing that to. So go back there and be with that one. What was he or she thinking? And notice whatever that thought is, that you did not actually choose to believe it. It was an unconscious convergence of lots of mental programming and reactions to stimuli. But see that once you were believing it, you could not have acted any other way. It was like the belief is a happening, like a firing of neural networks. In that moment, there it is, you're believing it. Given that you were believing it, you couldn't have acted any other way. You're not to blame for the belief. You didn't consciously say to yourself, well, I think I'm going to believe this. This is huge when you start to become the observer of your thinking and realize that, oh my goodness, and just because it showed up doesn't mean it was the truth, but we are in the habit of believing it. So that's why questioning it, what we're going to talk about in the webinar, is so powerful. So given that belief, then you go in and find that you actually had good motives. You thought you were helping someone. You thought you were helping yourself even. And it is fine to be the helper of yourself. If that littlest part of you was believing something about another person or a situation where you felt threatened, you felt you needed to do what you did to take care of yourself. It was like an instinct. You couldn't have acted any other way. And that also includes the spark of love. And the spark of love for yourself is completely okay. We tend to have this party line about selfishness in our society that makes it so that, oh no, well, I just had my own best interests at heart. Well, who else is supposed to have those other than you? And what you'll learn in the webinar is how to question the thinking that is scaring you to start with, that's making you feel that the other person or situation is actually a threat to you. But as long as you are believing that, then acting out of love for yourself, or believing you were helping your spouse or a child, I have yet to find a place where I can't find innocence and a loving motive behind that. Whatever you're believing, even you look at things in the government that are going on, and different people are on different sides of the fence, and you think, well, I can't find a loving motive there, but you really can. And that's part of what this helps, is when you get into practice of finding your own loving motives. And often, actually, you can find them more easily for other people. You can look at them and going, well, given what they're believing, I can see that they think they're acting in the highest good. Okay, you can often see that with other people. Well, here's your chance to see it for yourself. So this step has been all about reconnecting to your own innocence. This step is about forgiveness. Finding there was actually nothing to forgive. You were actually acting out of the best place you could be in that moment. But you may still fear the outcomes of that. So we'll get to that in step 2. Just focus now in step 1. Stay with yourself until you find that forgiveness. One woman in our mastermind group was mercilessly beating herself up and had been regretting years giving up a beloved pet. And when we went back in, at first she did this wheel of love by herself, and she saw some of the reasons she gave up the pet and what she was thinking. But she continued to beat herself up and stay in the hell of regret, and then moved on to the next step. Stay here and keep staying here till you really, really forgive yourself, till you find that you were doing the best you could. But you know what? If you can't, sometimes it helps to go on to the next step too, and then come back to this. But when I stayed with her, we went back in and worked on that and got to a much, much deeper level of forgiveness. I think it's almost cleared up now, but if it's not, that's okay too. We'll work with that some more until she can think about that situation with nothing but love for herself and everyone involved, and trust that all is well, and that she can't know that any other outcome would have actually been better than what did take place. So here's where you experience self-solidarity, forgiveness, support, and warm compassion for the well-meaning you that acted the best way you could given what you were believing in that moment. So you realize that even under the worst of behaviors, you can always find a loving motive. And then just cherish yourself like never before for that. You be the one. Even if no one else sees your innocence, you be there for that you. So then you may have found all of that, but then you've still got your fears of the outcomes and the consequences of your actions. So then you move on to, what am I fearing now? This one used to say, what was I thinking then? What am I thinking now? And what am I thinking about the future? But it seemed a little confusing, so I changed it to, what am I fearing now? And this is where you get to relax into realizing that your monkey mind cannot know what is a good or a bad outcome, and that it is based on that assumption of a bad outcome is the only reason you went into regret hell to start with. So you ask yourself, well, what am I fearing now? You might even make a list. Sometimes when I make a list, I go all the way to, well, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and that's going to happen, and ultimately I'm homeless in the gutter. I mean, our minds just take off with this stuff. So you might want to write it down, and if it doesn't shift, you may want to come back and do the work on some of those thoughts later. That's what I'm going to be telling you more about too in tomorrow's webinar. Or it's not tomorrow, actually, sorry. It's whenever you get to watching it. So anyway, so you notice the thoughts that you started believing that plunged you into regret hell. You accept that your mind can't know that any given outcome will or will not happen. It's fascinating the way we believe our minds when they predict the future. You know, it would be like if we saw on the news where someone said, tomorrow at 3:15 p.m., someone will lose control of their car and drive into a restaurant and kill 3 people. We would never believe that. But we believe it when our minds tell us that. Oh, they're going to be mad. They're going to, you know, when I found this self-solidarity thing, it was when I advocated for a loved one of mine in a way that I was sure was going to have horrible consequences for that person. And that ultimately that person then would never speak to me again. And I had to go all the way to the worst case scenario and realize I was living in that worst case scenario, even after all this amazing mental health that I've attained over all these years, and this work that I've done on myself through the work in other ways. I was plunged into hell there, and I knew that there was a gift for me in it. And it had to be that big and that deep and that bad related to someone I love so much to help me find that, you know what, even if they leave me, even if the outcomes seem to be very bad for that person, I am not going to do this to myself anymore. I know exactly what I was believing when I did that. And I know how tired and frustrated I was with the situation and how much I wanted to advocate, and that I honestly believed I was doing the right thing. And I am not going to do this to myself anymore. What we do to ourselves is what brings war into the world. If you want peace in the world, get peace between you and you. If you want peace in your relationship, get peace between you and you. Because your inner world is what is getting projected onto the outside. If you're beating yourself up, then someone can just look at you sideways and you're going to assume they're thinking about you what you already think about yourself. And heaven forbid if they actually come out and say something that pushes one of those buttons where your cup is already full of self-criticism, so they don't get to add even one more thing. So this is huge when you realize that you can go to your worst case scenarios and realize that those could yield best case outcomes in the end. In this case, this was probably one of the most painful things that I had been through. I was pointing everything anyone could think about me, any of the worst things people could do and the ways that it would affect my loved one. All of that was pointed at me like machine guns. And from that came this self-solidarity, which was a best case outcome because I've been able to hand it off to so many people now to start getting it for themselves. So you know how it is where you lose that parking space and then you run into a dear friend because of where you ended up parking. You know that. So start collecting those scenarios in your life that all my clients know there is no such thing as a bad outcome. We cannot know that whatever happens is going to ultimately be a bad thing. So you live in that not knowing place. You get your mind right size and get humble, and then come back again and love the spark of love you had in the beginning even more than ever, and thank those little kindergarten motives that were under all the self-criticism, and relax into the truth of not knowing. Let your self-protective instincts get right-sized as you turn the outcomes over to something greater than your monkey mind, trusting that you cannot absolutely know what outcomes will ultimately be better for you, others, and the planet. So then you go to step 3 with your situation and ask yourself, well, what is it I want from others or life? And that may have come up quite a bit in your fears. That's okay. Maybe when you wrote your fears down, it had a lot to do with other people leaving you, being mad at you, using their power over you by firing you. Something else, withholding love from you, or maybe it's a fear that your actions will be hurtful to them, or that life, through its natural consequences, a check is going to bounce now, that kind of thing. What do you need from life? And again, this is a good place to probably make a list if you can. What do you want? What do you want from others? What do you feel like you need? Even like, how do you want them to treat you? What do you want them to say and do and all of that? And then this, in some ways, is a shortcut to what is like the turnarounds in the work, and using the reliable symmetry of happiness as a mirror for yourself, where then you look at those very things and give those things to yourself. So if you want them to forgive you for what you did, forgive yourself. If you want them to understand why you did it, then you understand. You stay there with yourself and don't forget why you did it. If you want life to show you, lots of times we wait around, we keep beating ourselves up until life proves to us, and you're like, that everything's going to be okay. So, all right, well, I guess I was okay because nothing bad happened. I guess the check didn't bounce. Cool. But we're just at the mercy of life and others' behaviors when we do that, because it is completely out of our control. And when others are unhappy with us, that is completely over there in their court. That has everything to do with their history, their projections, what they are believing. So they may stay mad at you, and you may not be able to change others' reactions to you. But you can come back and give these things to yourself. And once you have done all of this, once you have truly forgiven yourself and faced your fears and given yourself what you need, then as you find that you really did take actions that have caused harm for others, that is where you can now make some really clean amends. I'm calling it all out amends, because you clean up your side of the street so well first that it is never at all about them making you feel better. They can even come at you with both barrels, everything they've got that they suffered as a result of the consequences of your actions. That is a true amends, when you can even invite them to tell you more so that you learn more about yourself. Most people are afraid of that, because then they're afraid they'll go back into regret hell, beat themselves up. But once you know what to do with that, and you know that that is just going to lead you to a higher plateau of love, joy, forgiveness, connectedness to life, and especially freedom, unconditional love for yourself. And once you master that, you can have it for others. You can see their innocence. You can love exactly what shows up. So it's huge, and just what you want to come in, and you, as Byron Katie would often say, be the hero you've been waiting for. I say, come in and rescue yourself in this step. Be what you want from others. Stay by your side no matter what. Love what you have to offer. Cheer yourself on. Invest in you. Never give up on you. Realize that none of the consequences you fear from life or others are worse than what you have been doing to yourself. So when you get to, with this, you return and you get to live from this deep well of self-solidarity. And I've got clients telling me all the time now that they are taking so many more risks in their lives. And not just stupid risks, they are calculated risks where beforehand you think, well, do I really want to send this email? Can I really do that? Can I tell them how I feel? And you get to the place where you go, you know what? I'm keeping my own counsel, and this feels really, really good to me. And I'm going to be able to deal with the consequences. I'm willing to, in order to stay in solidarity with myself, I want to take this action. And I can't know the consequences for others or how they will react or what the outcomes will be. And I'm willing to take the risk just to step more and more and more into being who I am, into living the life that only flows through me, into putting out in the world all the gifts I have to give. And I see for myself, as I get better and better at the thing that used to scare me the most, and what I talk about in this Spark of Self-Love ebook that you're going to get after the webinar, is things like sending out a big email broadcast to a mailing list. It's very scary. And in the book, you entrepreneurs know about this, so you'll read about how I was all happy about getting the broadcast done, and then I sunk into a candlelit bathtub, and then the thought hit, I should have waited till tomorrow morning. I've sent too many emails. And so anyway, you can read about that, but it's just fascinating how now I can hit send on an email to many more thousands of people, and know that I'm going to be able to deal with whatever comes up. Invariably, there is a typo. Invariably, my old should have self still comes up. It was a way of life for me. I absolutely lived in regret. I second guessed how I spent my time, how I spent my money, what I ordered in a restaurant, everything. And so that's still going to come up. It still does, and it just mostly dies right back down, because I hear the thought, well, I should have because I did. Well, I can't know that there's a better outcome and what will happen. And I know I was doing the best I could and engaging in other people's reactions, not being able to please all of the people all of the time, but mostly it lives in us. And even though this isn't the right cover thing, because it says 5-part webinar series, I want to make sure that you come and show up at the Radical Relationship Relief webinar. You'll get the time and reminders in your inbox. So let us remind you. Thank us for that. Don't unsubscribe. And I'll be going over the really, really honed in on 6 keys to dependable peace and delicious connection, which are so much clearer and really have an order that, and there are happiness hacks, clear specific tools now that support you in each of those 6 keys. And actually the title of the workshop or the webinar is How to Be Reliably Happy Whether or Not Others Change. And so this happiness hack, this wheel of self-love, is just one of the tools that you can use. So the 6 keys cover not only regret, but also what to do with defensiveness, fear, anger, and also just, resisting, not wanting to be the one to have to change, being tired of being the one to work on yourself all the time, and knowing then how to really live from that free fall into life as is. So once again, you're going to be able to get those, and you also, that will qualify you to come in and get a free self-solidarity support and strategy session with me, where we'll talk about next steps. how we can support you, and that may include the Radical Relationship Relief Boot Camp or a retreat or the year-long mastermind group called the Symmetry of Self-Love, or just hang in there and start using these tools all by yourself or with a partner. So yeah, that's really, really exciting. And if you want to know more, you can go to SeanMashy.com, or just wait till later. Just make sure that your time and energy comes into showing up for that webinar tomorrow. And I just want to thank you for all of it, and take care, stay with yourself, use this wheel of self-love. Let me know if you have comments, questions. I would love to hear them. And especially ask if you can join our Happiness Hacks Facebook group. That's where I answer questions and be able to share about, you can share your celebrations and challenges, questions, and I'll answer them in a way that other people can get on there and listen to as well, to get help across the board as someone else works their situation. All right, thank you so much. See you soon at the webinar. Bye-bye.